Lots going on around the world of the WNBA, and someone who's been almost every place is Rob Knox, writer at The Next, who joins us. Locked on Women's Basketball starts now.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
A very pleasant good morning. Happy Tuesday to you. I am Howard Megdal, welcoming you to Locked On Women's Basketball. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. Over 200,000 of you showed up last month alone, showing up for us the way we show up for you 6 days a week. And of course, it is not just me. It is not even just me and Rob. It is the entire team over at The Next, giving you over 100 reported pieces about women's basketball every month. Go to thenexthoops.com and sign up. You can get our free email, see what we're about, or subscribe. $9 a month, $72 a year. It is the Women's Basketball Network you've been waiting for. It is coverage of everything, thenexthoops.com. And when I say everything, Rob Knox is really somebody who provides a little bit of everything. Rob was on a grand tour at 2 different WNBA venues in 2 days, writes features for us, covers the HBCU scene for us on the collegiate side. Rob's been a friend for a long time. I'm delighted I get to work with him, as I tell him every chance I get. And I'm happy he's here today to talk basketball with us. Rob, the place I want to start is the piece that you wrote, which I really felt like cut through a lot of the noise about Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark. We'll talk about that in segment one. Segment two, getting into your tour, a little bit about seeing Asia Wilson in person and the history she's putting up there. But I just want to start, before we get into the weeds of it, what do you think is the biggest misconception between popular conversation about how the WNBA is welcoming Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark and the reality on the ground you got from reporting and talking directly to the players and coaches?
Yeah, first and foremost, thanks for having me again. I always enjoy being part of this discussion, and I think the biggest, I think the biggest misconception that's out there that was partly created at the start of the year is that, that the current women in the league dislike both of the rookies, both of them, and further from the truth. I think that there's a great appreciation for both players. Well, and I know that you asked about specifically Caitlin and Angel, but I'm gonna just go general before we go specific. But I think there's a genuine appreciation for the entire rookie class that has come into the WNBA this year. I think there is a genuine level of respect for the rookies, and I think that's helped. Also. For the veterans and the people and the players that's been in the league, I think this also help them elevate their game as well, because they know that they understand, they recognize that they have to continually improve and continually get better, or else, these rookies will take their spot and think nothing of it. So I think that it's been a perfect storm. In a positive way of this rookie class, and specifically, I wrote in the story. I know we'll talk a little bit more about it too, but I know I specifically wrote towards the end of it that, for better or for worse, Angel and Caitlin are forever going to be linked.
Right.
And and I mean, you even look at the the fact they're going to be teammates, which is going to be outstanding, to be honest with you. And and they've both said that they've never had a personal dislike towards one another or animosity towards one another or anything like that. But I think that obviously when it's competition and you're competing against the person across from you, you're going to want to beat them. And, they're two highly competitive players and they want to beat each other. And there's nothing wrong with that.
It's really been weird for me as I've been watching this conversation, how much people are trying to turn it into a binary thing instead of understanding that this is a league full of hyper competitive and ultimately human beings, people who are capable of having multiple emotional responses within the framework of a same moment, let alone within a larger situation. The idea that it can only be that these players want to absolutely crush one another on the court, or they can have an appreciation for what off the court this means, being able to walk into arenas routinely with 16, 17, 18,000 people more often than we were seeing prior to the 2024 season. The idea that players could be at some level frustrated that that audience wasn't already there while still being delighted by the fact that it is here now. The idea that you need to make a rookie prove herself while at the same time, and especially within teams themselves, be able to be supportive of that rookie, having gone through it themselves. That gray area, and I would just urge everyone to go to thenexthoops.com and read what Rob wrote about it. I feel like comes across in so much of the reporting here. But I do want to isolate on the conversation you had with Elizabeth Williams, who, again, to my mind, is one of the people I learned the most from in the course of my WNBA reporting. And we certainly disappointed that she is hurt. We wish her a speedy recovery. But take me through kind of the way in which she really spoke about the gray area here for how everyone came to understand, in this case, her Chicago Sky teammate and Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark, somebody who, like you said, will be linked to Angel for the way in which they both came into the league, but are not some, it must be one as opposed to the other as you think about the league as a whole.
Yeah, so a few things to unpack there. First and foremost, I think the one thing that's been a little frustrating is the narrative that you have to choose one or the other.
Right.
Like, you have to choose Angel Reese. If you don't choose, if you like Caitlin Clark, then you hate Angel Reese and vice versa. And I think that's so unfair. I think that's a disservice to the sport, because somebody like me, I love both of them, right? I love watching both of them play. They bring energy and passion to the game. And, obviously there's a debate right now, rookie of the year talk, right? And you look at the numbers, it's so, oh my gosh, it's so close. They're so close to like everything. I mean, Angel's streak of 13 double-doubles is amazing.
Amazing.
And but quietly beneath the surface, Caitlin Clark has racked up a few double-doubles. And obviously she had the triple-double over the weekend. And, they're both impacting their teams in different ways, and they're both being defended differently, right? Caitlin, everybody's going to point to the turnovers, but, Caitlin has the ball a lot more than Angel does, and Caitlin's being blitzed more. I think, Caitlin's been forced to make more decisions in a faster and a shorter period of time. Whereas, Angel, she has to make a lot of decisions as well, but a lot of, rebounding is, get yourself in position, understanding angles, and she does a fantastic job with that, right? But
can I just speak to that real quickly, because I think it's an underreported facet of her game. One of the reasons why I was as confident as I was that she would come in and be a contributor right away on the WNBA side is that she was elite when it came to rebounding in college. And that was a task that I thought would translate well. The way in which it is and how it is this elite intelligence for anticipation, for knowing where the ball is going to be ahead of time. She doesn't jump the highest. She isn't the most athletic at her position. She simply seems to understand that better than almost anyone I've seen in the history of this league. And I think the numbers bear that out. But to your other point, it's such a different game from the game that Caitlin Clark has. The idea that we can't appreciate them, not just on different teams, but they're so different as players, is hard for me to fathom.
No, for sure. I mean, it'd be, you look at Caitlin. I mean, she's been picked up 94 feet. She's been blitzed. She's had to go up against, some of the elite defenders in WNBA, and I think that the New York game is illustrative of her growth, right? She had 3 points in one game that she played against the Liberty.
Mm-hmm.
And again, coming off of a lot of factors there, but you saw how much more poised and how she was the other day. But I do want to, Elizabeth, she had a really great perspective, and she said something that was really good. She said, we have a rookie class that understands their value and understands their worth, and part of that has come from what's happened the last couple of years in the NCAA with NIL, right? they're coming in as brands and as people where they know their worth and they understand that there's opportunities outside of women, outside of the WNBA.
It is ultimately, I think, upon all of us, media included, who are new to this, to be, and this is the quote you had from Neko Gormike, who you spoke to for this piece, be in discovery mode. And so, yes, for us, we continue to report on anything and everything related to the league, but I also view it as a personal obligation and responsibility, and frankly, a pleasure to make sure that we have the opportunity to let media be in discovery mode to help folks on the on-ramp, because we want to see more coverage along the way. I want to talk more about that and how you do that in your individual reporting, along with some of your observations for some recent games in segment 2. But first, I want to talk about BetterHelp. And this episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. And look, ultimately, we have friends, we have family, we have ways of thinking through what is going on in our lives. But sometimes it's helpful to get an outside voice. Sometimes it's possible to have somebody who is unbiased, who comes into it and hears what you're saying and gives you strategies for the best way to deal with what's going on in your life. That's what therapy is all about. And BetterHelp makes it easier than ever. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You fill out a brief questionnaire, you get matched with a licensed therapist. If that doesn't work, you switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So start focusing the way you need to with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Back here in segment 2 with the great Rob Knox from the Next. And Rob, you spent 2 times, 2 days, 2 different games. You got to see 33% of the league in that process, right? I mean, it's just something interesting to me. Take me through just what that back-to-back was like as a personal experience before we get into some of the observations and reporting that you had out of it.
Well, from a personal experience, for those who don't know me, I love the WNBA. I've loved it ever since it started, and I've covered it and I followed it since it started. And I've been blessed to be in the media space for quite some time, and I've covered the WNBA since 2014. So I've just have an appreciation for the league, and I love it. And so when I knew I was going to be in Vegas for a conference, and I saw that they had a home game on the 7th, and I saw that the Mississippi Sky were playing on the 6th. So I said, I'm going to try my best to, make both games. Mm-hmm. And, initially, I'm looking to do, I'm going to put this out there. I'm looking to do a piece on Renee Montgomery in the future, because I think her story is really interesting. And so I thought that because the game was a prime video game that her and LaChina would be courtside in the pregame show like they were a few weeks ago in Indiana, but turned out they weren't. But long story short, as a fan, it was beautiful. It was amazing to, as you said, to see 33% of the league. And I wrote a personal blog about that. And I got a chance to see Angel Reese. I got a chance to see Aaliyah Edwards. I got a chance to see Asia Wilson, Skylar Diggins, Smith, the Neko Ogumake, Joe Lloyd, Izzy Harris had come back, Candy Carter have a fantastic performance. So you get to see these games and you just get to experience it. It was 10,000 people at both games. Now Southwest, they didn't almost let me be great and hit me there. We had some weather, some turbulence, and had to get diverted to Amarillo, Texas. But at the end of the day, I made it out to Seattle, and I was glad that I did, because I got a chance to, talk to NECA for the piece. And because of NECA's status as the president of the Players Association, it really lent a lot of value to what I was working on. And again, I have the history with NECA where I've talked to her before, and I understand understand her thought process and what they're trying to do. And she's been in a unique position where she's been in the league for a while, so she's seen the league evolve from where it was when she first came in to where it is now.
I mean, Rob, you have too. You've been at this a minute, as you pointed out. And I just wonder, being there in person back-to-back days, multiple venues, how different is it in your experience here in 2024? I can tell you personally that I was in Connecticut for opening night, and Mohegan Sun Arena felt different than it ever had before. And certainly I have felt that way throughout the home games at Barclays Center, relative even to things like the playoff atmosphere at Madison Square Garden going back in the day, that this feels different routinely. I can tell you the Garden would not necessarily open up their upper level, but Barclays Center, they are selling upper level tickets, and you just feel the energy in the arena. Is there just a routine base level of energy that's higher than we were ever used to before? What kind of stands out for you emotionally from the experience?
Yeah, I think the energy, man. I think the vibe is just amazing. I mean, Vegas is, let me tell you all this. If you don't get to a game, if you want to go to a WNBA game, please go to Vegas. It's such a vibe out there, and the vibe and the atmosphere matches the town, of course, right? But they got the dancers, the crowd is cheering, the retrieve free throws, experience on the scoreboard is cool. It's just it's amazing, and even the atmosphere in DC was phenomenal. And I covered games when they used to be at Capital One Arena before they moved over to ESA, and even though it was configured a little differently than I remembered it, I mean the energy was fantastic for Angel. I mean the crowd was into it, and so I felt that the energy in both places were really good. 2 years ago, I went to an Atlanta Dream game, and that was phenomenal. Last year I went up to Barclays Center. I went to a Liberty game. They played the Mystics, and I mean the energy there was great. And I think you're able to pull off a back-to-back in my case because of two outstanding media relations professionals for the Mystics, and Autumn and Ketsia and Carolyn and Gigi in Vegas. They were so accommodating. They've always been accommodating to me whenever I've needed something or wanted something. So, but yeah, the atmosphere is different. I mean, you have to get to a WNBA game this year. I mean, because you're going to see something fantastic. I mean, you just saw something. There's so many outstanding players.
Throughout the teams that aren't even going to make the playoffs are worth seeing. And again, it's fascinating to me. And it is something that you hear pretty frequently. Look, as of right now, as the standings sit here on Tuesday, the Chicago Sky and the Indiana Fever would be in the playoffs, but they'd be 7 and 8. They would be the last two teams in the playoffs. And so it is significant. It is worth keeping in mind. It is always worth going to. It is also an important point that you made, which is that the coverage, and listeners, I would just urge you to keep this in mind, can only be as good as the access allows it to be. So that is something that is, to a certain extent, out of journalists' hands. Just something to keep in mind as we go forward. So I'm glad you mentioned that too, Rob. But before we get to Asia, more in segment 3, and I do, because I want us to really drill down into her greatness. And you had a terrific story about it a couple of weeks ago. The great Matthew Walter, who covers the Aces for us regularly, had a piece about her becoming the all-time leading scorer. Before we go to break, was it clear that Las Vegas understands what it has in Asia Wilson? I don't mean the Aces. I mean Las Vegas writ large.
I think so. I think that I think one of the best parts about Vegas is they've really made a concerted effort to embrace the Aces, and they understand how a championship level team enhances the overall vibe of the city. So obviously Las Vegas, through with hockey, they won the Stanley Cup a few years ago, and now they won back-to-back WNBA championships. And 10 years ago, you would never think there would be a pro team in Las Vegas, or you never think that, college basketball or college athletics would play a game in Las Vegas outside of UNLV. Now Vegas is the go-to. Everything happens in Vegas.
And doesn't stay there. We're seeing that excitement all over. So back in segment 3, we're going to talk about Asia Wilson, who was probably the easiest all-star vote I've ever made. But first, want to take you to our break and our second sponsor today. I'm Howard Megdal, and you're listening to Locked On Women's Basketball. Locked On Women's Basketball is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel offers you the opportunity to wager on a large number of sports. You know, there are people you're going to hear who are like, oh no, what do we wager on? Basketball season has ended. Well, those of you here know all too well, basketball season never ended, and this might be the best part of your basketball season with the WNBA. FanDuel offers not just NBA, but WNBA as well, Major League Baseball. FanDuel has the ability to bet on sports whenever you want. All you have to do is open the app and dream up anytime you're in the mood how to bet. Now, this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster of bonus daily. So just so you understand, everyone, every day, all summer long, hop onto FanDuel.com and you'll see exactly what that means. Again, FanDuel.com. Start to make the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Imagine, Rob, an off season. What a thought. So we are back here in segment 3 talking about someone who has extremely not taken an off season when it comes to the summer in A'ja Wilson. And let's just talk about, I want to set the scene for understanding where A'ja is. There was a 3-person MVP race last year with A'ja Wilson and Alyssa Thomas and Breanna Stewart. And it was an extremely difficult decision to make as to who was the best of these players. We have not seen the high level of top players reduce in any way, to my mind, so far this season. However, A'ja Wilson, with Chelsea Gray out, was asked to do more and did more. And Chelsea Gray back. Now she is not only doing more, but she is doing it at as efficient a level as she did last year. That combination of volume and efficiency is one of the best seasons I have seen. And if you go back statistically, anyone has seen in the history of this league. So Rob, just starting here, I try to do this in my work. I think about it this way. Do you take a step back and say, you know, look, independent of making sure that we're telling these stories properly, I'm sitting here, I'm witnessing something of greatness. Did you kind of take that moment for yourself to say, you know, wow, this is one of the all-time greats performing at a higher level than she ever has before?
Oh, most definitely. Every time I watch her play, I just shake my head and see her in person. She had 6 points at halftime against Seattle in the game that I went to, and she finished with 25 in the second half. And I mean, she was just phenomenal. And so it's funny because you know, I was at the Mystics game, the Mystics Aces game in DC not too long ago, and she had 11 points, and most of them she had 9 points for most of the game. And, you know, so obviously 11 points is significantly below what she's been scoring this season, but the Aces won. And so post-game, you know, I was able to speak to A'ja one-on-one. Again, Carolyn, you talk about access. You know,
Caroline Williams. Thank you, Caroline Williams. Yeah, for sure.
So you know, I spoke with A'ja for about 5 minutes. And again, A'ja was so gracious with her time. And she was like, look, all I care about is that we got to win. You know, Washington did some things, but, you know, at the end of the day, I missed some shots. And one of the things that I asked her, because I think sometimes we take what she does for granted, right? And, you know, I think, you know, having the experience of working in athletic communications and having, you know, high level players and seeing them on a daily basis and the work ethic, you know, I was able to ask her, I was like, honestly, how hard is what you're doing? Because again, we take it for granted. We see, you know, some people just say it's easy to just score, and it's not easy to score 25, 28, 30 points a night. It just isn't, right? She said, it's definitely hard, but she said it's something that I challenge myself to bring my best self every single night, and, you know, and live up to that. Right. So she embraces it. Right. And when she embraces it, that just that just takes it to another level. And the fact that, Asia's been able to do what she's been doing, like you said, like you mentioned, whereas the other players still, Brianna Stewart still having a phenomenal year. Alyssa Thomas is still Alyssa Thomas.
Yeah.
She's outstanding. But Asia has stepped her game up 3-4 levels. I mean, and still want to know who voted her fourth in MVP last year. That was wild beyond measure.
Here's what I will say, and again, to go back to the specifics of the way in which she's doing it, it reminds me of a conversation I had with Dawn Staley in fact, it was just prior to the start of Asia Wilson's senior year. And what Dawn Staley did, and we have talked about Dawn, but we could talk about Dawn all day. The way she doesn't just have her teams win, but she prepares her players for what comes next. Is that Dawn was looking at what she wanted Asia to be in the pros, and she said, "I want her to be Candace Parker. Now it's time to be Candace Parker." The reason why I bring that up is that is an unfair thing to put on anyone unless you think she is capable of doing it. You can prep her to do it. Well, what Asia Wilson's doing this year is a 16.4 assist percentage, which is the best mark of her career. Chelsea Gray was out, and even with Chelsea back, Chelsea is not quite what she was prior to the injury. Asia's had to be more of essentially the point forward, secondary playmaker, however you want to define it. And she has done it in a way that she's doing it without costing her team more in the process. Her turnover percentage is down to 6.8%, which would be among the top 10 in the history, single season of turnover percentages in league history. Again, more playmaking while making fewer mistakes. And the same goes across. You're asking her to take more shots. Per 100 possessions, she's taking 28.3 field goal attempts per 100 possessions. That's the most in her career. That is up from 24.2 last year. She's still, again, keeping her true shooting percentage north of 60%. You are seeing somebody who is not making the kind of trade-offs that you would expect from anyone who's human. And you have to do that. And she's not even trading it off on the defensive side. Her defensive rebounding percentage is 28.9%. It's the highest of her career. She's not even trading it off in rim protection. She is at 6.7% block percentage. That is the highest of her career. She is at 2.6% steal percentage, a number you'd be comfortable with from a backcourt player. And she's doing it as a big, it is, sorry if you've heard it, the highest of her career. It just boggles the mind. And she's not even doing it in fewer minutes per game. She's playing 33.8 minutes per game. Rob, guess what? Highest of her career.
It's just amazing what she's been able to do. And again, we have to be in the era where we have to really step back and appreciate this greatness, because it may not happen again. I think sometimes as a society we get caught up in a microwave society, and we want everything to happen now. We want everything to happen yesterday, and things of that nature. But I think Asia is somebody, you just need to appreciate her. It's kind of like when you slow cook a piece of meat, right? You got to slow cook that thing for 8 hours. And Asia, right, somebody you just got to just appreciate just every single game, every single day of what she's been able to do. And it's been special.
I love that.
And people,
cooking.
Yeah, slow
it's
cooking.
Perfect.
They want her to be the next Candace Parker. Pretty soon, we want her. Who's the next Asia Wilson, right?
That's right.
But at the end of the day, she's one of one. And I think that with the level she's playing at and the focus that she's playing with, she's definitely the leader. And I think the other thing people forget too is, she's one of the faces of the league. So she's also doing promotional appearances. She's on commercials. She's speaking after every game, mostly every game. She didn't speak after the Washington game to the media, in the press conference, but she did talk to media.
Sure.
But I mean, she's doing she has a lot on her plate.
She does it all. And by the way, I didn't even mention this part. She's hitting almost 38% of her threes, which, shocker, is a career high. It does boggle the mind, the fact that Asia already and rightly has a statue, a literal statue of herself at South Carolina because of what she built there, barring something truly surprising on her way to a third MVP, at least 2 Defensive Player of the Years already. She's 27 years old. 27, turning 28 on August the 8th. What did you do before your 28th birthday? It wasn't, I don't mean you, Rob, I mean anyone. It was not, I can speak personally, nearly as much as what Asia Wilson has done. So, Rob, we could talk all day about it, but we are out of time. I am delighted always to chat basketball with you. Folks at home, make sure you are following everything Rob does, everything the team is doing over at the Next. We will be back with you tomorrow, as we are 6 days a week. Until then, I am Howard Megdal, wishing all of you a wonderful Tuesday.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.